quick shout out to the two Uber comrades on Patreon supporting this channel and my content. My partner Rosa, thank you Rosa, and Independent Left News. Definitely check out Independent Left News. So today I wanted to talk about the Blekingegade group. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Blekingegade group, Blekingegade gang. This group or gang was comprised of radical kind of socialist, communist revolutionaries during the 70s and 80s in Denmark, and they pulled off a number of really impressive robberies and heists, whether it was stealing money or robbing, banks or, getting weapons. Those funds or those weapons would then be sent to revolutionary movements in the global South, particularly to the PFLP, the Palestinian Front, the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, I believe is the acronym. And I came across this story. It's just really, really fascinating and interesting. So I wanted to do a little video and chat about it. So let's get into it. Let's find the link here that I'm going to be talking about. Where did it go? Here we go. Yep. The victory. Let's see. Victory of the Third World, the story of the Blekingegade gang. 63, the Communist Party of Denmark excommunicated one of their promising officers, an activist and political educator named Gottfried Appel. The Communist Party of Denmark was quite loyal to the Soviet interpretation of Marxism. Appel was increasingly favoring the Chinese communist theory of Mao. Appel decided to found a new communist org rooted in Maoism and established KAK shortly after. A very European Maoist org, KAK quickly became quite close with the Communist Party of China. KAK spent the next few years printing and distributing Maoist literature in Denmark, where Gottfried Appel himself developed his own unique interpretation of Marxism. See, Appel was always somewhat of a restless soul, even on the spectrum of left-wing revolutionaries. He had already embraced and renounced several varieties of Marxism that never seemed to encapsulate his total worldview. Appel eventually began to promote a new ideology that he called the parasite state theory. This conception of Marxism argued that the working class of Europe and America had been neutered, stripped of their desire for revolution by basic social welfare programs and the extraction of wealth from undeveloped countries. The long leftist struggle in developed countries had secured basic concessions from the capitalists, but this seemed to placate the people. In essence, the Western capitalists had bribed the working class enough to protect their own power. Obviously, that definitely applies a lot more to the, capitalist social welfare states in Europe than the US, I would argue. Selling the working class just enough rope to hang its revolutionary anger. Would the mass of America or Europe be willing to overthrow their capitalist rulers if it cost them their cars, their jobs, their lives? Therefore, Appel argued any socialists interested in revolution should seek to ally themselves with the working class of the undeveloped countries, the so-called Third World, who had not yet been bribed into submission and still held onto the revolutionary fire. KAK did not view the working class of the imperialist countries as enemies, but considered them unreliable when it came to the hard truths of class warfare. For Appel and KAK, the idea would become the driving force behind decades of struggle, and there is Gottfried Appel. Appel's deviation from standard Maoism and his intractable stubbornness eventually angered his sponsors in China, and KAK lost all direct Chinese support. In the late 60s, now independent, KAK began to turn inward. They subsequently operated on the basis of Appel's theories. Publications released by KAK ceased production. The youth wing of the party is folded into the main org, and Appel counsel members to educate themselves and refrain from public protests or violence. Gottfried Appel had decided to reorientate KAK towards promoted socialist revolutions in Third World, and its flagship program would be the new Clothes for Africa aid program. While KAK members and affiliates funneled clothing and supplies to African refugees, members of the KAK inner circle began meeting with an eclectic crowd of leftist revolutionaries, including Irish freedom fighters and representatives of the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, PFLP. November 70, KAK members Niels Jorgensen is arrested for tagging a building with pro-PFLP, Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. There, I remembered it. Pro-PFLP. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. What? You keep blowing me up for? Fuck. Make a goddamn video here. Yes. I don't know, just whatever. Probably, yeah. Let me back. Jesus Christ, just calling to see what Cliff Bars I wanted. Sorry about that. Okay. Back to the task at hand, learning about the Blekingegade group. Where did we go? Bum, bum, bum. Here we go. When observed from the outside, KK appeared to be a small group of barely militant communists with an eccentric take on theory and a focus on African aid. The public viewed them the same way as they would view any other communist group that seemed to be more study circle than revolutionary vanguard. Covertly, the core group was comprised of hardcore members with quite a bit more revolutionary zeal than the rest. The inner circle of less than 20 members, so very, tight-knit, 20, was beginning to lay groundwork for a sustained stranger-than-fiction campaign of direct action. The KK Inner Circle were committed Marxists and had developed a well-structured analysis of the political situation as they saw it. Regardless of any opinion on the group, KK can never be accused of poor prep. KK held Apple's parasite appel or Apple's appel, let me know, state theory to be gospel truth, and were intelligent enough not to engage in the Danish state in open guerrilla warfare, knowing they would be demolished. KAK ideology emphasized the promising socialist movements of Asia, Africa, and Central/South America as the only viable vehicles for world communism, so to the south they went. Strong secret links were forged with the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, and KAK members regularly made trips to the Middle East in order to negotiate. Discussion took place in the group about the best way to aid foreign socialist movements, and methods such as the investment or electronic scams were considered. However, the group decided they not possess the expertise to successfully carry out these plans. January 10th, 73, a weapons depot near the Jagersborg, suburb of Copenhagen, is robbed by a well-organized gang. The bourgeoisie makes the burglars, I should say, not the bourgeoisie. The burglars make off with several machine guns and high-power rifles. There's one of the members, John Weinman, KK/MK member. Most KK members were oblivious to the existence of a secret circle at the top of the org, but Gottfried Appel was over Ulla Houghton, their lieutenant Jens Holger Jensen, and a few companions had decided to really put their money where their theoretical mouths were. What better way to aid the Palestinians, they thought, than to send a little liberated cash their way, or weapons too? Who better liberate that cash from who better to liberate that cash from than the parasite state itself? Pretty solid logic there, I think. KK Inner Circle began what they called the illegal practice in the early 70s. They would conduct robberies in and around Denmark in order to furnish the PFLP and other liberation movements with weapons and money. In order to remain covert, the Inner Circle operated under a set of strict rules. Obviously, absolute secrecy was first. Obviously, that's kind of rule number one when you're engaging in any type of legal or clandestine activities. Don't tell anybody about it, or it's going to get blown up, right? It makes complete sense. Any crimes would be conducted professionally. All operations would be meticulously planned, and the robbers would be as efficient as possible. The core members would also be trained rigorously in tactics of weapons handling. No weak-willed liberal arts students here. Crimes would appear completely apolitical. Jumping on top of a bank counter and shouting revolutionary slogans is a good way to get the door of your little activist group kicked in by the cops. Better to let the police believe that you're simply in it for the money. Yes, for sure. During the period from 74 to 77, the KAK Corps carried out a series of robberies and fraud schemes that seemed to increase in complexity and ambition over time. In fact, the group members tried to top the haul of previous robbery with each attempt. December 9th, 75, KAK intercepted a cash delivery truck in Copenhagen, made off with a 500,000 Danish krone. After nearly year-long cool-off period, the group struck again by storming a Copenhagen post office, escaping with 550,000 krone. These crimes confounded Danish police, who assumed that they were related but not know what to make of this heavily armed professional gang of thieves. Robberies were the main component of illegal practice, but like any efficient practice, the KAK Corps knew the value of diversification. Postal fraud scheme running throughout 76 resulted in a take of nearly 1.5 million krone, the largest yet. That's the amount of money that they were able to steal or rob, however you want to say it, is pretty impressive, like in the millions. And it was sent to these revolutionary movements, particularly PFLP, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Boom, I got it. Apple, Houghton, and Holger had incubated a hierarchical, efficient, illegal aid org that was now smuggling cash and weapons to foreign liberation movements at an astounding rate. Their heist movie-style scheme ran smoothly until, like many revolutionary clan, they fell upon each other. When they initially joined Apple and Houghton's KKK, many of the members had been relatively inexperienced but earnest young revolutionaries. However, by the end of the 70s, they gained quite a bit of political military experience. Many began to question the rigid hierarchy of KKK, which nearly all power emanated from Apple and Houghton. Meanwhile, the issue of gender discrimination had essentially brought all legal and illegal KKK activities to a grinding halt. Houghton and the female members of the group began to demand that the male members participate in self-criticism and re-education sessions in order to combat the perceived male dominance of KKK. This policy continued for several months, and the internal turmoil strained many of the long-standing relationships between members. Eventually, a purge of selected male members was proposed. From real accounts, rank-and-file KKK members, men and women, began to feel that this anti-patriarchal campaign had strayed from its noble intentions and that it had threatened to destroy the group. In May 78, core members called on the leadership of Apple and Houghton to discuss the anti-gender discrimination campaign. When core members suggested ending the self-destructive program, Houghton balked, and Apple's plan to suspend KKK activities for 6 months was suspended. Split would be permanent, and the core members voted to boot Apple and Houghton from the org. There's one of the members, Niels Jorgensen. Apple and Houghton retained the KKK name after the schism, which meant that the remaining members had to form a new org. Months of self-criticism and circular arguments had frustrated the core members, who were chomping at the bit to resume both legal and less than legal activities. They rapidly constructed an org that inherited most of the former KKK connections and political convictions, but operated under a rotating leadership instead of Apple and Houghton's iron grip. Manifest Communistic MKA was established by 10 to 15 former KKK members in late 78. MKA continued to support the Close in Africa campaign, and updates to Apple's original theory gave MKA stability and purpose. This allowed them to resume the illegal practice. The 1980s were the core members' most active years, but began with a kind of slapstick tragedy. Jens Holger Jensen was an integral member of KKK and MKA, and on September 1580, he was sitting in a van with Niels Jorgensen in a stakeout mission in central Denmark. The mission and Holger Jensen's life were cut short when a truck slammed into his parked vehicle. Jorgensen had inexplicably stepped outside the van and exploited his newfound luck by returning to the scene for lost equipment, explaining to police that he was Holger Jensen's next of kin. After the setback, MKA began to really hit its stride. In 82, MKA hit a Copenhagen post office for nearly 800,000 krone and recruited several new members to its small circle. They followed this up with a daring raid on a Swedish armory in which the group hopped the border and stole enough military-grade explosives to cause some real havoc. This increased activity is partially responsible to the plight of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who had been driven from their Lebanese headquarters after the 82 Israeli invasion of Lebanon. MKA was still sending every ounce of profit from the heist to the PFLP and other movements, and money was easy enough to smuggle. The rocket launchers, anti-tank missiles, and grenades smuggled out of Sweden were different matter and were buried in the forest in Europe for later pickup by PFLP agents. Yeah, it does seem like it would obviously be a little bit easier to smuggle cash out of a country than it would be anti-tank missiles, grenades, or rocket launchers for sure. Let's see. One of these caches was actually discovered by French police in 86, but no evidence linking it to MKA was present. Probably speaks to how, meticulous, they were and how well thought out, their plans were for the most part. Plans were made to duplicate this robbery in Norway, but the dead-drop method of smuggling weapons proved too unreliable, and the preparations were scrapped. One other scuttle plan deviated from MKA's usual methods and involved the kidnapping of the heir to Swedish food packaging company Tetra Pak for ransom. MKA members stated later that empathy in the general logistics of kidnapping someone caused them to abandon the idiotic plan. So this member, Torkel Lawson, was actually how I came across this story. Because he was part of this group, and he wrote a book about it called Turning Money into Rebellion, which I'd like to get at some point when I finish this and some other books that I'm currently have in rotation. So another member there, Torkel Lawson. Legally, MKA's public volunteer wing supported as many projects as it could. The illegal practice was still a secret, closely guarded by the MKA core. Close for Africa continued to send supplies to refugees, and the group assisted or helped found liberation movements in El Salvador, South Africa, and beyond. Eventually, the Close for Africa project was dismantled, reborn as a coffee shop that sent all of its profits to these movements. The shop folded in 1997, but MKA can't be faulted for being a few years early to the cafe gym. MKA activity would only intensify through the 80s. March 83, a bank truck is stopped by a gang of armed men. They threaten the workers and leave with a massive take of 8.3 million krone. 2.5 years later, Copenhagen post office is held up by a similar group of armed men for 1.5 million krone. So almost 10 million krone in those two heists alone. In what is that? A 2.5, 3 year period. Likely due to the fact that business was booming, MKA core members obtained a new hideout in Copenhagen. 85 rented under fake names, bills paid in cash, the standard procedures. Professionalism can slip, however, and in 86, Niels Jorgensen is arrested in the process of stealing a car. He avoids jail time suspiciously easily, although this was not the first indication that MK was being watched. Members assumed they were being tracked for years and took steps to hide info and direct links to any crime. MKA operatives have been living extensive double lives, up to 15 years at that point, which I imagine would be, very, very difficult, right? Always having to, think about what you say, who you say, where you go, are you being followed, etc., etc. I could see that leading to, becoming quite paranoid. It became extremely low practice in covering their tracks and ensuring evidence. Danish police, despite their suspicion, had no grasp of the full scale of the MKA activities. December 22nd, 86. MKA members steal the pre-Christmas profits of the Dales shopping center as they're being passed to a bank transport. Several store employees attempt to, again, what the fuck is wrong with people, whether it be bank workers or otherwise, trying to stop people from stealing or like, no, dude, don't be a fucking idiot. Don't die for this corporation, for this business. Just give them the fucking money or whatever they're trying to take. Don't be a fucking hero. And MK is forced to fight them off in a dramatic escape. No fatalities occur, but MK fractures the skull of the store security chief with the butt of a pistol. In response, the group constructs a soft baton designed to incapacitate unruly bystanders without braining them. Theft is one thing, but hardened murders, these were not. I don't know, maybe get like some pepper spray or something like that, right? Or, I don't know, a taser. But again, maybe that could cause a heart attack or something. Any good heist movie ends with a shootout, although the events of the 88 Blekingegade robbery probably don't qualify for that title. Several MKA members disguised as policemen talked their way through the gate of a post office that was about to receive a high-value mail shipment. The shipment was worth over 13 million krone and would be their biggest score yet. Once the shipment arrived, the robbers drew sawn-off shotguns and threatened the workers as they loaded shipments in their own van. MKA knew that the target vehicle would have an onboard alarm, but made a crucial error not expecting that alarm to be directly connected to local police. By the time the loot was loaded, the robbers had run out of time and were taking fire from police already in position on the street. As the robbers peeled out of the post office, one member of the crew fired a fateful shotgun blast. The shot killed one of the pursuing policemen, began a chain of events that would truly end MKA. While the Danish government had been monitoring MK for some time, it had been content to sit back and observe. Whether this was a ploy to gather intelligence in groups such as the PFLP or simple lack of evidence, no one can be sure. However, the death of an officer during the previous robbery had tarnished MKA's heretofore spotless fatality record. This could not stand. The Danish police arrested 5 members of the MK Corps in April of the following year. Police recovered 2 sets of keys, but no clues as to what address those keys unlocked. MKA may even have survived this due to their careful planning and the lack of any hard evidence against them. Luckily for Danish law enforcement, MK member Carsten Nielsen's lack of diligence and security would soon seal the group's fate. That's kind of just shows like the weakest link in a group or a team can often be their downfall, as it seemed like potentially was with the MKA. Just a week after the arrest, a paranoid Nielsen managed to run his car into a lamppost, and police sent a now blind and half-dead Nielsen to the hospital. They happened across lockpicks, bundles of cash, and a telephone bill that Nielsen had forgotten in his car's back seat. A telephone bill for MK's previously mentioned hideout. Again, they seemed like they maybe got a little too sloppy, a little too comfortable, or maybe they just like, this is a long time to be, keep such a high level of professionalism to not get caught. It would be quite tiring. Now that the police had an address to match the keys, they conducted a search and made the discoveries that turned the Blekingegade gang, so named after the press after the street which housed their hideouts, into Danish celebrities, disguises, forgery equipment, evidence tying the occupants to robberies, everything needed to make a case against the suspects in custody. One particular file found in the apartment concerning suspected Israeli intelligence operative drew brief accusations of anti-Semitism, but MK members have always claimed that the files had nothing to do with the religion or ancestry of those named in it. An adjacent room lay enough weapons to outfit an entire guerrilla group: handguns, machine guns, anti-tank missiles, you name it. MKA had included it in this awe-inspiring weapons cache. The Danish press lost their collective minds. See, mountains of evidence have been revealed that the Blekingegade apartment and the gang had indeed killed a policeman. Here we go. While the reign as the kings of Danish revolutionary crime was over, the accused members fared far better than one would expect. Gottfried Appel and other 1970s era KAK members were questioned, but Danish law excluded all crimes prior to 80 due to statute of limitations. Attempts to charge the accused with terrorism or tied to the violent German Red Army faction fell flat. Prosecutors could not even conclusively prove that any single MKA members fired the shot that killed a police officer during their final robbery. In the end, 7 MKA members, including Torkel Lawson, who wrote this awesome book, served prison sentences. Torkel Lawson in particular, he served 6 years, related to the robberies or lesser infractions. Thanks to the combination of weak evidence and lenient Danish sentencing, no KA members served more than 10 years in prison. The action of KAK/MKA did not result in a great wave of revolution fueled by the Marxist movement of former colonial subjects. Clearly, their 20th century Communist Robin Hood Act did benefit several foreign resistance movements, but it'd simply never be enough to tip the scales of global struggle. I mean, they did a dent. They made a dent, and their heart was definitely, in the right place, and they definitely put themselves, out there for, a decade plus, fighting or engaging in the illegal practice in order to aid these revolutionary movements in the global South. And I think that can just really impressive. It seems very, frankly, selfless what this Blekingegade gang did from my perspective. And who knows how much longer they would have been able to get away with these activities if they hadn't killed that Danish policeman, right? Let's see. However, the saga of KAK/MKA is a fascinating slice of leftist and criminal history, and Apple's theories encourage a complete redirection of energies of serious revolutionaries in the developed world. And the KA focus on Africa, South America, or Asian leftist movements was based in a clear framework that went beyond any kind of racist cultural fetishism. Since the fall of the Blekingegade gang, the Western working class have stirred, but only slightly. The actions of KAK/MKA can fall anywhere on one's personal moral spectrum, but it's hard to dispute the prescience of their analysis. Oh, that's an interesting poster. World Bank. Here, the most talented imperialists work to enhance exploitation of the oppressed people to increase the profits of the monopolies. We stand with the oppressed. Who are you with? KAK Youth Wing Flyer, late 60s. Oh, there's their sources. Very, very, very interesting. At least, from my opinion, frankly, the Blekingegade gang. I mean, real life Robin Hood figures, frankly, but like in the Robin Hood movies or stories, it's Robin Hood, stealing from the rich, giving to the poor, his country. But the Blekingegade group, was stealing from the, what the heck is that thing? The parasites they sought, and then sending that money, that resources, those weapons to a certain point to the revolutionaries in the Third World, particularly in Palestine, to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And I just think just so fascinating and interesting, and how long they were able to keep up this practice of illegal activities was quite impressive. So I mean, probably it seems like 15, 20 plus million krone. I wonder what that is in US dollars. Let me check. Krone to dollar. I'm just gonna put in Norwegian. Oh, it's like I'm gonna put 15. That's 15,000. Need 1, 2, 3. I mean, so at least now I'll show my screen. So it says I put in 15 million krone, and that is like 17 million dollars. Here we go. Look at that. So again, this was in the 70s and 80s when this illegal practice was going on. So that money in today's dollars would be probably at least 50%, if not 100% more than that. So they were able to, get away with massive amounts of money, not to mention how much the, weapons were worth. What was the anti-tank or rocket launchers or grenades. Just very, very, very interesting. So that's why I thought I would share this story of the Blekingegade group, because again, it's just something that I found about within the last week or two when I started reading this book. Because again, Torkel Lawson was one of the members who ended up being arrested and charged in the 80s for this, along I think it said five other members of the KAK group. Very, very interesting, and I'd be curious to hear in the comment sections down below, what is your perspective on this? Is this something that you think was justified in their actions to engage in this, illegal activity to fund liberation movements, particularly in Palestine and other places? I think it was somewhat justified. I think what they were doing, and they were able to get a massive amount of money and weapons to a lesser extent to the PLF-LP and these other liberation movements all around the world. Obviously, like the article points out, didn't initiate some type of tipping point, but they were at least doing something that they thought would aid these revolutionary movements. So kudos to them. And I mean, they could have paid quite a huge price for it. Some of them did. Some of them spent considerable amount of time in prison. I just think about those members would probably still be all jailed if this had happened in the United States, right? But because this was in Denmark, they were treated much more leniently. Anyways, that's my thoughts. Leave yours down below on the Blekingegade group, and let me know if I'm mispronouncing any of these words. I very well may have been. Like the video if you like the damn video. Subscribe for more content. Become a Patreon if you're so inclined. All proud of the people. Peace. Much love.